Reason number 2 goes a little deeper. You have to realize all of the important things that are taking place during the time of trouble. Right now, when judgments are poured out on the land, when disasters happen and all these things, people have no idea how bad things would be right now if God was not continually holding back Satan. If he was not continually restraining Satan, we would all be wiped off the face of the earth like this, and this earth would just be left desolate if Satan had his way. People don't often think about this, but God is continually restraining Satan. For this reason, this is one reason, I think we don't really, truly realize how wicked sin and Satan are. Because God is continually holding it back, restraining it. But you have to realize during the time of trouble, God lets go of the 4 winds of strife. And that restraining power is released. And the entire universe is going to be left to see exactly what it would be like if Satan had won the great controversy. Exactly what it would be like if Satan had his way. Because he's going to be allowed to do pretty much whatever he wants other than hurt God's people. And that is going to be a first-class lesson to the entire universe. Not only everyone on the earth, but to the entire universe. It will be a first-class lesson of exactly what sin, how hideous sin and Satan are. And you know what? It's part of this unmasking work that has been going on throughout the great controversy. Throughout history, God has been continually unmasking Satan, a layer at a time. A big layer came off at the cross. We're told that the angels, from that point in time on, they were no longer deceived. They no longer had any more sympathies for Satan. From the beginning, Satan has been very deceptive, and he was so deceptive that the angels couldn't quite figure out what was going on. And they loved Lucifer, but they loved Christ, and they couldn't quite figure out all that was going on. But when they saw what he did to Jesus, they knew where he was going, and that forever cut off any ties of sympathy there. But when you read that statement, I believe it's from Desire of Ages, it goes on to say, but even then, God didn't destroy Satan, because there was still more that needed to be revealed. And so we've seen God doing this revealing work. He's been dealing with the sin problem the only way that he could deal with it so that it would never come back again. If he had just killed Satan instantly at the beginning of sin, the entire universe would have served God out of fear rather than out of love. But because God has dealt with the sin problem so wisely to let it reveal itself, the entire universe is going to see, especially during the time of trouble, exactly what sin and Satan are all about. And you know what? It's going to be the capping off of this revealing work that has been going on that makes sure that sin will never rise again. This is part of what is going on during the time of trouble. We often think of it as being a terrible time, and it will be a rocky time for us, but you have to realize there are some incredibly important issues taking place during the time of trouble. We need this time of trouble, because without it, this is the finishing off of this work that makes sure that sin will never rise again, peeling off these final layers of deception that Satan has had masking him. So there are incredibly important issues taking place during the time of trouble, and this, I believe, is why we see the difference between our duty now and our duty then. God has given us a part to do now during probationary time, but during that time, he wants our attention to be focused somewhere else. Just think about it for a minute. If you are in a situation where you can't by yourself, where you're being sought after for your life, all these terrible plagues are falling around you, and all these things are going on, where is your attention going to be if you have to provide for your own physical necessities during that time? You're going to be in survival mode, are you not? And so when you talk to people who have been in a survival situation, they'll tell you the same story. When you are in a life and death situation, you become totally absorbed in that topic of staying alive. And friends, this is what God doesn't want to be taking place during the time of trouble, because he wants our attention to be focused on this most important work that is taking place, this final unmasking of Satan. And so this, I believe, is why we see the difference between our duty now and our duty then. God has given us a part to do now, but during that time, he wants us to be totally focused on the big issues that are at stake. And so God is telling us, I'm going to provide for your physical necessities then, so you don't have to deal with that issue. And so this, I believe, is why we see the difference between our duty now and our duty then. It's a matter of timing. Solomon had a lot to say to us regarding timing. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. And he goes on to say a time for this, a time for that. There is a time for every season, for everything under the heaven. There's a time. We have a work to do now. We have a work to do then. And this kind of sums it up. It is the very essence of all right faith to do the right thing at the right time. This is what it's all about, friends. Doing the right thing at the right time. We need to do the right thing now, do the part that God has given us now during probationary time, but also to do the right thing then. It is the essence of all right faith to do the right thing at the right time. Well, in closing, there's one more aspect of preparation that I want to look at, and it's a very exciting aspect. It's very exciting to me. Did you realize that your actions now regarding preparing in the way that God has told us to, your actions now are going to directly affect whether or not you'll be able to do God's work at the peak of the crisis? Did you realize that? Well, take a look. Let's go back to our event line here and place a few more events on here. I'm not going to take the time to prove why I'm placing each point here and there. I think you'll find it to be fairly common sense, but if you have any questions, I'll be glad to share with you why I've placed these different events where they are. But let's just, for the sake of time, let's just place them for now, because this is going to help us to focus in on a particular time period in this event line. First issue I want to place is this Mark of the Beast issue, this great Mark of the Beast issue that the Bible tells us of. And if there's anyone here that's not familiar with what the Bible has to say regarding the Mark of the Beast, this is something that you cannot be ignorant of in these last days. This is the test question in these last days. And the Bible is very clear about this issue. So if you have any questions about this, or if you'd like some material, Bible study on this issue or anything, we have some excellent material on this. Just be sure and talk to us afterwards. We'll be glad to share that with you. But we don't have time to go into a Bible study on this issue right now. I'm just placing it on our event line. And naturally, it has to come before probation closes, because this is the great test question. The Mark of the Beast issue is the test question that tests the entire earth. So, it must come before probation closes. Issue number 2, or event number 2, the decree that no man can buy or sell save he that had the mark. And this, I'm not prepared to place it at a specific point in our event line. I'm going to put it somewhere between when the Mark of the Beast issue comes to a head and the close of probation. It has to be somewhere between these two for this reason. It must come at or after when the Mark of the Beast issue comes to a head, because this is one of the means of enforcing the Mark of the Beast. Remember, Revelation 13 says that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark. So this is one of the big means of enforcing this issue. It has to come at or after the Mark of the Beast issue. Now, it must come before probation closes, because this is part of what makes it such a great test. This no buy, no sell decree is part of what makes it such a great test. If there was only a $50 fine attached to this Mark of the Beast issue, it wouldn't be much of a test, would it? But when you attach a penalty like this, in today's society, that means survival. Because people are totally dependent for their necessities. And if you can't buy or sell with the way that most people are set up today, that means survival. And that makes this a very great test indeed. And then, final event to place on here are the disasters that have been predicted to take place. And we know that they had even started years ago, many years ago, but they were to increase in intensity and in frequency up to the end. And we know that they must get pretty bad by the time that the mark of the beast issue comes around, because these disasters, we are told, are one of the big things that bring in the mark of the beast issue. You're aware of that, aren't you? This is one of the two big issues that we're told, because you think about it. People see a terrorist attack or this or that, and they say, oh, well, some bad people did that. But when you have the elements unleashed, people say, this is God. God must be upset at us. We've got to do something. We've got to get back to God. And you know where they go with it from there. And so this, we are told from the pen of inspiration, these disasters are one of the major factors that usher in this mark of the beast issue. Interestingly enough, one of the other major factors that I read about is a financial crisis. Ever heard of a financial crisis anywhere? You can read about it in the book Great Controversy. It talks about that they will bring in this mark of the beast issue because they are looking for a restoration of their temporal prosperity and the favor of God. Now, for them to be looking for a restoration of their temporal prosperity, what has to have happened? For something to be restored, it has to have been taken away, doesn't it? That tells me that the whole financial crisis is going to play into this whole thing. And obviously, we are seeing that beginning to take place, and I think we can expect it to get even worse and worse at some point in time. So, clearly, these disasters have to get pretty bad by the time that the mark of the beast issue comes around, because you think about it, this secular nation, you know how secular it has become. It's going to take some incredible disasters to bring this nation to its knees. So just think about this right now. Disasters of that magnitude. Now these are not to be confused with the 7 last plagues. That comes after probation closes. Where are we going with all this? Well, I want to focus in on this particular period of time on our event line, because this is where it happens, friends. This is where everyone on earth has to make their decision whether they are going to obey God and His law or men and their laws. This is the critical point in Earth's history. This is when you have all these things converging at this one time. You have these disasters being poured out. You have this mark of the beast issue coming about, decree that no man can buy or sell, everyone having to make their decisions, all these things converging at one point in time. This is the critical point in Earth's history. And my question is, what will be the most effective way to reach people for Christ during the very peak of the crisis here, when we must be most busily engaged in doing God's work? What will be the most effective way to reach people for Christ?
The helpless.
We haven't been left to guess about this issue. I think I heard it. As religious aggression subverts the liberties of our nation, those who would stand for freedom of conscience will be placed in unfavorable positions. For their own sake, they should, while they have opportunity, become intelligent in regard to disease, its causes, prevention, and cure. And those who do this will find a field of labor anywhere. There will be suffering ones, plenty of them. And friends, there will be suffering ones, plenty of them. You have even our own government telling us not if, but when there's a major pandemic or bio attack or terrorist attack or this or that. You can see, not only is our government telling us this, but we have a more sure word of prophecy telling us that these things are coming upon the earth. The devil imparts to the air a deadly taint, and thousands fall with the pestilence thereof, and statements along these lines. And so, clearly, there will be suffering ones, plenty of them. And for instance, we have a friend who is the director of an emergency room in a large city, and he told us some very disturbing things. He indicated that it was quite common across the nation in hospitals. He said our emergency rooms are at the breaking point. So they just can't deal with more people. He said they are being so overloaded. He said in my ER, he said on an average winter day, it isn't uncommon for a person to have to wait a couple days to get a bed. And he said that's on an average winter day. He said all it takes is the slightest influx in whatever it may be of people coming into the ER, and he said we're inundated. We can't deal with any more. And so you look at all these things converging at this point, all these disasters, plagues, any number of things taking place where there's huge numbers of casualties. The hospital's at the breaking point even now. And you can see, friends, there will be suffering ones, plenty of them, and the hospitals aren't going to be able to deal with most of them. And you know what? God is the master of turning curses into blessings, and I believe he's going to do that with this situation, because this will be an incredible opportunity for us to be able to minister to others during the very peak of the crisis, when everyone is having to make their decision for or against God. During this key point in Earth's history, God will be giving us an incredible opportunity to reach others' hearts through helping them with their physical needs. What can bond you with someone more than helping them with their physical needs when they are sick or dying or in terrible distress like this? You help people in times like this in any way that you can. When you minister to people like this, you will have an incredible opportunity to share Christ with others and to share the truths of these end times, these great end time issues. And friends, God is going to turn this curse into a blessing, because he is going to give his people, whoever has prepared, an incredible opportunity to reach large numbers of people in a very effective way, helping them with their physical necessities and being able to share with them the truths of these last days. There will be suffering ones, plenty of them, who will need help, not only among those of our own faith, but largely among those who know not the truth. And remember, this is the work that's going through to the end. I wish to tell you that soon there will be no work done in ministerial lines but medical missionary work. So this is the work that's going through to the end, and this will be the most effective way to reach people for Christ during this peak of the crisis right here. But we have a problem. This is also the time when it's very difficult, if not impossible, to buy or sell. That adds some complications to the issue, doesn't it? Just think about it, friends. If we are going to be able to do the very work that God has given us at the peak of the crisis, how are we going to do it if we have not prepared in the way that God has told us to? Just think about it. Some basic, bare necessities that you simply have got to have. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but I'm about to put up here just a few items to stimulate your thinking and start thinking about what is it going to take to be able to do God's work at the very peak of the crisis. Well, just a few issues. We'll start out with something that's very simple, but we don't want to overlook even the simple things. And that is shelter or heat. Now, I realize you probably don't get terribly cold here, but it can even get a little bit chilly. But let's say perhaps you end up in an area where it gets colder. Have you ever tried to get well? Have you ever been really sick and you've tried to get well in a ice-cold house? It just doesn't happen, does it? I've had the unfortunate experience of being really sick when we were staying in a house that was cold. Well, it felt cold to me. It was probably only in the 50s or 60s, low 60s maybe, but it felt cold, and I just couldn't seem to get better. And I remember reading about times when there's been a freak ice storm or this or that has knocked out the power in areas, and people, their source of heat was knocked out, and it would be 20 some odd degrees inside their house. And they'd have to abandon their house and go stay in some kind of a public shelter. Friends, this is not a good situation to be in. And so, even though I just want you to take stock of these issues and think, if I could not buy or sell, would I be able to keep my home warm? This is a fairly basic issue, getting a little bit increasing in in issues of importance, or in issues where we are often lacking, is the issue of water. Not only do you need water for proper hydration to be able to survive from drinking it, but also one of the most effective tools in the medical missionaries toolkit is hydrotherapy. Some people call it water therapy. If you've not heard of hydrotherapy, this is something that you simply must become familiar with. And you know what? It's very easy. It's not rocket science. There are some basic principles that you need to understand, but God has blessed us with a lot of excellent material out there on hydrotherapy, and it's very powerful. Very simple, but very powerful when combined with God's power. Just to tell you a couple of quick stories, my dad had torn his knee very, very badly, re-injured it when we were re-roofing a house. It had been a few days, and he still was hardly able to even walk on it, and he was afraid he was going to have surgery. And we got to thinking about maybe hydrotherapy. So my mom started doing hot and cold fomentations on his knee. And within 3 days, he was up and walking around. Within a couple of weeks, totally healed, no pain, no surgery, just water. Just simple things. And another story that comes to my mind, there's many, many stories that could be mentioned, but another one that comes to my mind is I was listening to a presentation that a physician was giving on the bird flu. We've all heard of the bird flu in the media. You know how they have linked it with the Spanish flu of 1918? Well, in this presentation, this physician was showing the link between the two, giving the history of it. But one thing that I really found interesting in this presentation was this physician told about how her aunt was a nurse when the Spanish flu of 1918 was in full swing. And she told the experience of her aunt how they weren't finding anything that would work. They were having a very high mortality rate with the Spanish flu of 1918. People were just dropping like flies, and they couldn't do anything that seemed to be effective for it. And thankfully, her aunt had been trained at one of our institutions back when they taught hydrotherapy. And she got to thinking, I wonder if that would work. So she started doing hot and cold fomentations on her patients' chests. And you know what? They started pulling out of it. And if memory serves me right, I don't think she hardly lost a single patient after she started doing hydrotherapy on them. And this was serious. I mean, there were tens of millions of people that died across the world from that Spanish flu of 1918. So just a couple of stories, you see that it's very simple, but when you use it with God's power, very powerful. Simple remedies that anyone can do. You might be thinking, well, I'm not a doctor or I'm not a nurse, but you know what? God's simple remedies are very simple. Anyone can do them. It's going to take some effort on your part to learn the principles involved for these simple things, but it's something that anyone can do. And you know what? God wants us to be in a position where we will all be able to be mobilized at this crisis and be able to be an incredible help and blessing to others at the very peak of the crisis, and be able to share our faith in the most effective way, right at the time when everyone is having to make their decision. So the point that I want you to think about here is, we see the importance of water. It's a necessity. And my question to you is, in your current situation, if you could not by yourself, would you be able to have plenty of clean running water in your house? This is a very important issue, friends. I mean, not only are we talking about supplying a basic necessity for our family, we're talking about our ability to be able to even be of any help to others at the very peak of the crisis. This is important, friends. And if we are not prepared, we need to do something about it while we still have a little window of opportunity. God has given us an opportunity to prepare, and it's past time that we do something about it, friends. Another issue is hot water. Most of your hydrotherapy treatments require the contrast of hot and cold. And so, obviously, my question would be, in your current situation, would you be able to have plenty of hot water if you could not by yourself? These are some serious issues, friends. This is by no means exhaustive. Just, I want to get your brain thinking. What is it going to take for me to be able to operate at this time And we need to start thinking about these things and start doing something about it. And finally, the issue of food. If you're trying to help someone get better, proper nutrition is a must. You can do all the treatments you want, or all this or all that, but if the person is not getting good nutrition, they're not going to get better. And even though right now, in this country, we do hear of food shortages elsewhere, but in this country, it seems that at least for the time being, we seem to have enough food. But I question how much nutritious food we have in this country right now. You know, I've heard some startling studies along these lines that indicate that the levels of nutrition in our food and in our soils have been dropping dramatically for many years now. And so you have that whole issue, but just think about this. My question is, if you could not buy or sell in your current situation right now, would you be able to have plenty of nutritious food, not only for yourself and your family? God has given us the duty to take care of our family, but would you be able to have plenty of nutritious food for others as well? This is not a thing about me and mine, friends. This is about being able to help others. Think about this, friends. How are you going to witness to starving people with a bowl of soup when you're standing in the soup lines yourself?
Amen.
It's not going to happen, is it? It's not. You're going to be in exactly the same situation that they are, and you're not going to be able to help anyone. You are going to be part of the problem rather than part of the solution. God wants His people to be part of the solution, friends. He wants us to be the head and not the tail. And so God has given us so much warning about these things that are coming. He's told us what is coming, and He has told us what to do about it. And friends, the time has come long ago to do something about it. And so we must do something about it while we can, because the time is coming, and I believe it's coming quickly, when it will be too late to do anything about it. So friends, these things take time, and we've got to do something about it now while we can make a move wisely. God has given us counsel to make wise moves, to not move rashly. And friends, I've got to tell you, the ultimate rash move is if you wait until the crisis comes and you try to make your move then. Talk about a rash move. You're talking a seriously rash move. You won't be able to sell your house. You won't be able to do anything. You won't be able to function. We're told that the time is coming when those who wish to leave the cities will not be able. That is from inspiration, friends. And it goes on to say we must be preparing for these issues. So friends, God has told us to move wisely, and in order to be able to move wisely, we've got to start moving now while we're in a time of relative peace. God has given us a little window of opportunity to make these preparations that are so essential in order to be able to be a part of God's work at the end. What a disaster it would be if we come to the peak of the crisis and we find that we, as God's people, are out of business because we did not prepare in the way God has told us to. But friends, that's exactly what will happen if we don't prepare in the way God has told us to. We won't be able to even function. We won't be able to do anything for anyone else because we'll be in the same situation. So friends, God has called us to be a Noah in these last days. You know, our work is very similar to that of Noah. Jesus tells us, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." And in Hebrews 11 it tells us, "By faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet." Have we been warned of God of things not seen as yet? Absolutely. What did he do? He moved with fear. He prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. And friends, you must realize that when Noah built this ark, he built that ark so that anyone who would could get on board and be saved from the flood. You realize that, don't you? Why was he preaching for 120 years? He was pleading with these people for 120 years to come, to get back to God, and to come on board the ark and be saved from this flood. He was pleading for these people to do this. Noah built that. This was not a selfish thing that he did. He built that ark so that anyone who would could come on board and be safe. And you know what, friends? We have another ark to build in these last days. You realize that. We have a spiritual ark to build and a physical ark to build. In a special way, God has called us to be a spiritual ark to people in these last days. But you know what? He's also called us to be a physical ark. Remember, God is just as interested in the physical aspects of your life as he is in the spiritual. And so he has called us to use the physical things of life to be able to gain access to people's hearts and share with them the truths of these last days. And so God is giving us an opportunity. He's calling us to be a Noah in these last days. He's calling us to the right kind of independence. You know, there's a good kind of independence and a bad kind of independence. God is calling us to the good kind. Independence of one kind is praiseworthy. To desire to bear your own weight and not to eat the bread of dependence is right. And friends, in this nation today, we are eating the bread of dependence. There's no way around it, friends. We are totally dependent for all of our basic necessities of life. Totally. We are eating the bread of dependence. It is a noble, generous ambition that dictates the wish to be self-supporting. And so, friends, God has given us an opportunity, a little window of opportunity to make these essential preparations so that we will be able to do the work that God has given us at the very peak of the crisis. And so remember, going back to our keynote, the work of the people of God is to prepare for the events of the future, which will soon come upon them with blinding force. So friends, this is our work today and now. Today is the day of preparation. And so, please, my prayer for you, friends, is that you will earnestly consider your situation, that you will search this out for yourself, see all that God has to say about this issue, and then take action. Because God is looking for people who are willing to take action on what he says to do. And so God has told us what is coming. He has told us how to prepare, and it's time that we do it, friends. And so with that in mind, let's take just a short break, and we will change our compute, and we will, well, are you ready to start? Oh, that's right.